Welcome to Escape Artist, the podcast where we celebrate the bold souls who have dared to break free from the confines of the corporate 9-to-5 grind to pursue their passions and create a life of personal and financial freedom. Each week, we'll uncover the stories of extraordinary individuals who have embarked on their own entrepreneurial adventures. Our guests will share their personal tales of liberation, resilience, and triumph. Together, we'll explore the pivotal moments, the challenges, and the lessons learned along the way. So join me as we embark on a journey of discovery, courage, and boundless potential. Let's design the life you've always dreamed of, where the only boss is you. Here's your host, Laura Demetrius.
What's up, Escape Artists? Today I am with Mike Balstad. He is a certified exit planning advisor. He's the founder of BizLeavable and the force behind Achieve Leavability, a movement to overhaul America's economic engine one small business at a time. And I have to tell you, I've had a conversation with him about an hour now leading into this episode, and it's been a very eye-opening conversation. He has a framework he's going to share with everybody today, and I'm just super excited for you guys to meet Mike. Mike, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, and hello, everyone.
Of course. So I'm going to just jump into the very first question here,
Sure.
which I think a lot of people are going to have after hearing that introduction. How did you get involved in this?
Well, you can tell by my hairline, I'm not the youngest guy. So about 25 years ago, I was getting into the financial industry. I had a late family member at the time that was in business for themselves, had been for a long time, and their business suffered what otherwise would be a preventable death. And really, it was due to a lack of access to good guidance and information. Because I was working with entrepreneurs in my field, it really hit home with me that, if I'm helping people with insurance and financial planning and things, those are going to be moot points if their business can't survive. And so, things that I really feel comfortable with, that I'm kind of passionate about, are really around coaching, encouragement, education. And so I found myself spending a lot of time with my clients, identifying where there may be challenges in their business, or, in asking questions. They'd bring up a problem they were having, and, I'd help them, kind of talk through it. And one of the things I found very early in my career is I got some clients that were coming in for investment banking, they're raising capital. I noticed that there was even if the sophistication of the particular client wasn't any different than we'll call them Main Street business clients, there was a difference in the services they were getting. Even though looking at the two of them, they didn't have any more money, one or the other, in their own pocket. But the ones that were going after investment banking were getting a lot more services. And consequently, because they were getting professional guidance, and the guidance is often provided by these firms, they were able to make better informed decisions. You see, we've all heard how a lot of people graduate high school financially illiterate. In fact, many of us have heard the joke, it's tax season. Thank God they taught me calculus in high school, right?
Yeah.
Not learning relevant math. But then a percentage of us, and I think it's Garrett White, for all you ClickBundles fans, who says the 1% crazy, there's a percentage of us that then go into business for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And not only have we got no training or guidance in business, but we also don't necessarily have financial literacy. So we're kind of left in a vacuum to make these decisions.
Without that equal access that larger businesses get.
Yeah. And so what really became clear to me early on is that I felt like I needed to bring Wall Street sensibility to Main Street business, really to help those business owners that are responsible for half of our economic activity in this country, that are responsible for half of our new jobs. They're putting all of their financial risk on making sure their business survives and taking care of their families, taking care of their employees in their communities. So ensuring that they've got the help that they need to do that. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a system that doesn't provide those services. You'll find courses around offered by different agencies, a lot around starting a business or getting access to capital, right? Mm-hmm. Well, starting a business from scratch the statistics are only 1 in 10 will survive 15 years.
Wow.
So that means if someone started a business at 30 years old, you've got a 90% chance that you're going to be starting over at age 45.
Wow.
Not a, and you're going to take all the risk to do that. But 50% will be gone within 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's a high turnover rate. So how do we help people avoid that risk? Well, we provide the guidance on how to start with the end in mind. Does it make more sense to buy an existing business or start one from scratch? So going back a little further on your question, so what happened with my late family member, that's what kind of focused my direction. But big picture, what changed things for me was really started in my teens. So dropped out of high school, my senior year of high school. I was married by the time I was 22. I was a musician, thought I was going to make my living being a drummer, right? Got married when I was 22. We had our first child when I was 23. Well, playing drums doesn't pay the bills unless you're very fortunate. So I had to find something with my lack of education, but good with numbers. I wound up in retail management. Was in that role for several years until I was offered a managerial program with that company. And my one prerequisite was that'll be great as long as we don't have to move. We live in this community. This is where our family is. This is where we're raising our kids.
Right.
First thing that happened when I finished my program is they wanted to move me 2 states away. So it was clear, well, they don't have a respect for my needs. They're focused on what the needs of the company. Well, I'm trading my time for dollars. That was, when you look back, I agreed. I agreed on a trade of my time to perform particular services, whether I enjoyed those services or not, for a particular amount of money that was capped at the number of hours I could work. So I've capped my income earnings at an amount that was less than I wanted to make for myself, was dependent on the education that I had that capped that. And in that time, I would have to trade it for somebody else's priorities than my own.
Right.
I would have to trade that for what they needed in sales numbers versus what I would want to see as a metric, which is, how are my children growing? Are they well adjusted? Are they getting enough of my time? So in that moment, I left that job because, again, that was a non-negotiable. But I had to sit down and say, okay, well, really, Mike, you're 29 years old. You're a high school dropout. Really, what are you going to do? You've got 2 kids and a wife at home, and you've got a house payment. Mm-hmm. So somehow in all of that, I became a homeowner by the time I was 26. But anyway, so I'm looking at this seemingly untenable situation, and somewhere in that, I got some clarity about some things. It's like, well, any other job that I'm going to find, whether it's what I truly am qualified for because of education, or I'm able to talk myself into another job, whatever the case may be, I've got the same thing where I could be capping my income. I'm going to have the same thing where I don't have flexibility of my time for my priorities, for what I want, for how I live my life, for how I spend my time, and what legacy that I want to create, right? Mm-hmm. I would be trading it for dollars to someone else. And then I also had to figure out, what do I actually enjoy? Now, a lot of people, and I've heard this more than once, that they'll say it's selfish to hold out for something you want or something that you enjoy. I think it's actually selfish the other way, because if you take a job that you don't enjoy, you're not engaged, which means you're giving less of yourself to that job than you would one that you enjoyed, which means you're actually shorting that transaction for that boss because they're paying you to be engaged, right? So that's my argument to that. You're cheating yourself and the employer.
Totally.
Putting yourself in a role that doesn't fulfill you emotionally, spiritually, and financially, right?
Yeah, neither of you are benefiting from that.
Not whatsoever. So I'd sit down and have a really difficult and brutal conversation with myself. The first things I had to ask myself was, okay, you don't have an education, so you got to fix that. So I went back and I got my diploma, and I asked myself some questions. What are you good at, and what are you not good at? Well, from a standpoint of planning and strategy, and numbers. I'm kind of Rain Man with numbers. Those were things that were really strong for me. Irrespective of the fact that I didn't have a formal education,
Yeah.
I did have a natural gift in the areas of creativity and in numbers.
Yeah.
So what was I really bad at? I could come up with an incredible plan for you. I could come up with the metrics that you need, and I'll speak to that in a little bit. I could come up with all of that pretty much on the spot, it seemed like. But if you wanted me to be the taskmaster and execute that, I would blow it up famously, right? I am not the guy you want doing that. So I had to be really clear on what I had to offer and what I didn't have to offer. And then within that, I had to say, well, just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I necessarily want to do those things. So
Right.
can I have a conversation? Can I encourage someone? Can I ask probing, open-ended questions? Yes. And are those key aspects of sales? Yes. Do I want to sell widgets? No, I don't want to be a salesperson.
And there's a great power in knowing that about yourself. I think a lot of people don't even understand where their strengths and their weaknesses lie because they haven't really questioned that yet. So I think knowing there's a huge power in that.
It is. I mean, I think that people that most readily will see that are going to be folks who have faced a change in their life. And usually those changes are foisted upon us because as people, most of us, 99 plus some, 99 plus percent, except some people that maybe just really masochistic, we avoid change.
Yeah.
We avoid change until the change is less uncomfortable than staying the same. People avoid quitting smoking until they're told that they've got cancer, right? So that's an extreme example, but we typically will avoid change. In my circumstance, I was faced with unemployment and few options. And I realized in that moment that I don't have a whole lot of options of things before me that aren't going to take work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have one chance to recreate myself here because beyond this, my financial obligations are only going to increase as my children get older, as we have more kids, if we do, as costs of living go up. So I may as well pick something that I feel like is going to be well suited to me, and that because I'm engaged in it, I'll have the motivation to grow in it.
Yeah.
Because starting a business, starting a career, it all takes a lot of energy, and it's really easy to give up if you're not invested, if you don't feel really motivated. In fact, there's a gentleman by the name of Myron Golden, and he's someone who's a stalwart resource for ClickFunnels. He talks about choice versus decision. Where choice, we can choose something. Well, I can choose to wear a white shirt today. I could have also decided, you know what, for this interview today, maybe I don't want to wear a white shirt. I could have easily changed my mind. Choices are very easy to change, where deciding is removing other options. And it's much easier to do that when we feel passionate about what it is. Otherwise, we're lukewarm and we can easily move in and out of things, which means we're not going to progress much in each of them. And we're just kind of spinning our wheels. So
that's got to be relatable for so many people.
Yeah, I mean, where those difficult times like what I faced, and I know that everybody else has, they're actually gifts because they really make us face the fact that we may not enjoy what we're doing, and maybe we should take a look at that if we want a better life for ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. Especially in this season of my life, that feels very relatable. Yeah.
So the knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you want to do, what you not want to do, those are all important. But then the other thing that came up about it is why you want the life that you want, the lifestyle that you want. This is nothing I've invented. I mean, there's folks like Simon Sinek that have, the power of why. You've got a lot of people that talk about it, but it's very true. It's the biggest fuel that you're going to have. My thing was, I didn't want to pay someone else to raise my kids.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to be at the field trips. I got to go on a week-long trip with my daughter when she did her Yosemite trip and spend a week just watching her grow and become independent. It was the most amazing thing for me. And she got to see that her dad wanted to be involved.
Yeah, that's huge.
Regardless of what I was, her dad wanted to be involved in her life and valued her, which pays dividends later on in her life now. I don't attribute
Absolutely.
that to myself, but you can see, what the investment of yourself and your children, what form that can take in their future.
It matters.
And so I made those choices. And what I found through all of that in my, the ability to empathize and communicate to people in their own terms, as a songwriter, I'm a storyteller, and really looking at how can I relate to the individual I'm speaking with. If I'm talking to a doctor about their business and helping them prepare it for their exit, I talk about the process, and I mention everything from, if I came to your office, there's probably someone really nice sitting at the counter with a clipboard where I'm going to be answering a bunch of questions about my history and what brings me here today. And you'll have looked at that to get an idea of what might be wrong with me and what things we could address. That's kind of how the process is with me. I'm not a doctor, but we're going to diagnose your business and we're going to compare the solutions with your priorities so that they can relate to it, right? So it's not scary, it's not intimidating. So those are the things that I knew that I wanted to fit in, and the numbers and all of that. So that brought me to financial services. And so at that point, I got licensed in investments, insurance, and financial planning. And that takes me to the first part where you asked, how did I get into the career? It was, having that foresight and that experience, applying it to this industry, wasn't so much looking at what the business possibilities were, because at that point it was still kind of product driven. It still was insurance. It still was financial. Financial firms really don't want to oversee things that they're not making money on. So this guidance that I'm giving people, I wasn't able to charge money for. So most of the work I was doing was for free. Not a winning business model. I don't suggest it without evaluating, how much you can afford to pay forward or go give with. But that led me to financial services. It allowed me to explore the creativity, the strategic planning. I'm helping people build financial plans, identify the appropriate financial and risk mitigation instruments to protect their lives, their incomes, and their legacies against the things that happen to us in everyday life.
Which is huge. And I have to say, I don't have data on this, but you've got to be some sort of unicorn for being somebody who didn't originally graduate high school, go back, get your diploma, and end up in finance and be a numbers person. Like, I think that's a rarity.
I think it's that whole, nurture versus nature. I mean, I know a lot of people who have had success that don't have a formal education.
Yeah, totally.
There are the finance side of it. I think that, it wasn't that I didn't do well at school. I was not diagnosed with ADHD until I was an adult. But also on top of that, just had a real challenging upbringing, right? It wasn't an environment that really was conducive to stability.
Yeah.
And so, it's a product of all of that. I wouldn't trade any of it, because if any of those things were absent, then my life wouldn't be what it is right now. I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't have the relationships that I do. God has me exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm at peace with that. So
yeah.
I don't know if I'm a unicorn. I would say that we all have very unique situations, but I'll say I haven't seen it as totally common that people are in my field that didn't have some kind of background or college degree.
Yeah, for sure. And I see you, and I know sometimes Gary Vee talks about this, for anyone who listens to Gary Vee occasionally, but he talks a lot about hard skills and soft skills. And just that first 1 hour conversation I had with you, I think it's also rare to see people who are equal parts hard skills and soft skills in an industry such as yours. And I think that that's really cool, how much empathy you show to other people, including your clients, so that when you think with the end in mind, going into the conversations that you have with them, caring so deeply about making sure that they are making the right choice. And I think that's really cool.
No, thank you for that. And it's, there was a book called The Roaring 2000s, and the author's last name is Dent. And really, it was looking at the impact of generations on the economy. So focusing on the baby boomer population. In the last couple of years, you're hearing all of this about the gray tsunami. Well, it's not a secret. And these people have been the age they are all the way from the time they were born. I mean, they've been coming through the economy. In the 80s, the baby boomers were saving for retirement. They were at their prime earning ages in the workforce. And so consequently, there's huge markets for mutual funds, 401ks, all of those things. Spring forward in the last several years, you've seen, elder care facilities popping up all over the place and retirement communities and all of that. Now you're seeing a lot of people starting to pay attention to, wow, over 50% of business owners are over the age of 50.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a huge, and over half of them that have been surveyed went out in the next 5 years. So, I mean, this is a market that's been there, but because it wasn't close to creating a transaction for service providers, that aspect of the market need hasn't been addressed until very recently. My field, exit planning, has been around for about 20 years, but we've seen an explosion in the number of exit planning advisors. In the last 4 years, we've seen it gone up, a few 100%, just because more and more people are seeing, oh, there's a need. There's all these owners are going to need to sell. There's millions of them. They're going to need to get out. Most of them have done no preparing whatsoever, and there's not enough capacity in the marketplace to take care of all of them.
Yeah.
And
And you
so,
do such a good job of helping connect the dots of those who want to leave and those who want to open. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience and your history with this work and how you've built your network to help find the right people for these?
absolutely. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I was very intentional about picking the overall field. And then I was intentional about, in that field of finance, where do I want to be? Well, I was working with business owners, not individuals. And then as time went on, I noticed that, a strategic plan, you're looking at things with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's like a story. It's like planning a road trip. If I'm sitting here saying I want to go on a road trip and I have a destination, how am I going to map that out?
Right.
If I'm sitting here in Nashville, which I am, I'm sitting in Nashville and I say, I'm going to go to New York. Well, I know I'm generally going to be driving northeast. Now, does that mean, and I could say, I'm going to take this highway, right? I'm going to take Highway 65 north for a while, and then I'm going to take this other one. So I can generally plan for that. Now, could there be detours? Sure, I could run into some road construction. There's going to be a detour that takes me around. But I'm generally going to have this plan on the direction that I'm going.
Right.
The same goes with business. One of the best examples I can give of starting with the end in mind is a tech startup. So you've got someone who maybe worked for a chip manufacturer, maybe they work for a software company, and they've been a cog in that wheel for a long time, and they've got a specialty in whatever it is they do. Or, Laura, you had a role with your former employer, and maybe you've got a very narrow and very deep view on a specific aspect of that industry that you you see something that no one else has seen, and you can create a very unique solution. Oftentimes you'll see people leave those companies and start a company to develop that particular unique item that they saw. Those are called acorns, right? They've fallen off the oak tree. And oftentimes the company will end up buying that acorn later, right? So that tech startup, when we talk about starting with the end in mind, we're looking at how you make business decisions. So if I've got a tech startup and I left a software company and I saw an opportunity where, I don't know, the company doesn't do really great with their user interface. And maybe that's something I'm really strong in. We've got some of the folks I know out of the Facebook community are specialists in the customer journey, right?
Yep.
So you've got a unique look at that. You drop out and you say, okay, I don't have enough money on my own to do this. I'm going to have to raise investment capital. Well, the first decision they make is, well, in order to do that, what does an investor want? Well, they don't just want a return of their investment. They want a return on their investment. And they want to know how long it's going to take them to get it. Right. So the business plan and the pitch deck is going to be built around, this is what we're going to earn, which is going to turn into this value. And our objective is to get acquired within the next 5 years, right? Their entire pitch deck was driven by starting with the end in mind. And the end is getting acquired. And in order to get acquired, they have to raise capital. Then the next business decision is, well, in order to be able to get capital from an unlimited number of investors, you're not going to be a sole proprietor. You're probably going to be a C corporation, or you're going to pick the entity. This does not constitute legal advice, by the way. I'm just using an example. But you're going to pick the type of entity that you are based on, will that help us to make it easier to raise capital? Or does it make sense to use crowdfunding, right? You're going to look at what decisions in your business are going to strategically make the most sense to help you towards the outcome you're looking for. Now, let's say that you've got a family business, and maybe you're watching this podcast because your parents started a business and they're looking to retire, and you're unhappy in your job. And you thought, well, maybe I do want to take over the family business. And you see an opportunity for technology and online marketing that they didn't see. Well, you're going to look at what is going to be necessary for that business to be conducive to you taking over. Because if the whole business is in your parents' heads and it's not documented, then there's no transferable value. If they die tomorrow, then you're left with, okay, what do I do with this thing, right? I had someone refer to me. That was the case. The gentleman died. He was 55 years old. He was a contractor. None of his family was involved in the business. And they were brought to me. And it was like, what do we do? Right? We don't know where the work is. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We're not contractors.
Oh my gosh.
Typically in a situation like that, what you're doing is you're liquidating just to stay out of the creditors.
Right.
Now, we were able to find a solution. We were able to recruit a young contractor that was out trying to get their start. They were really good, but they were trying to get their first customers. Like, well, you can walk into a business that's got 30 years of proven customers. So an outcome like that shouldn't be expected, right? That was very fortunate.
Yeah.
But typically, you're looking at a circumstance where someone is, if you're not starting for the end in mind from the standpoint of a family business, then you're not going to be building in the necessary things that prepare the family members to have the acumen when you're ready to retire at 60 or 70 years old. Typically you've been there maybe 30 years. You're 30 now, you're 60, you want to retire. Your child's 20. They don't have enough experience to take over the business, but you're ready to retire. How do you deal with that gap of experience? Well, then you've got a strategy for retaining a key employee, making sure that they want to be loyal and stay so that they can help operate the business until that child is trained up and ready to take over. So you see,
so important and so rarely thought about. Like I think about how important just making those connections are, or I think the theme here is starting with the end in mind. And it also makes me question like how many legacies go unfulfilled for people who don't think about these things up front.
Most.
Wow.
Only 3 in 10 businesses make it beyond the current generation. Wow. And you have attrition of 70% per generation. By generation 4, only 3 of the original 100 businesses are left.
Hello, my fellow digital entrepreneurs. It's Laura here, and I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce you to something truly transformative. Picture this. You're armed with the most cutting-edge digital marketing strategies, equipped with high-income skills, and empowered to establish and run a thriving online business in just a matter of days. That's where Digital Wealth Academy comes into play. This program isn't just your typical online course. It's a comprehensive journey meticulously crafted to guide you from where you are to where you dream of being. With Digital Wealth Academy, you'll learn everything from creating your own digital products to how to launch your business strategically. You can dive into funnel building, branding, email marketing, and how to build trust with your audience. What's even better is you'll gain exclusive access to the master resale rights to the course. So even if you don't have your own product yet, you can sell the course yourself to get your business started. Imagine rebranding and sharing this invaluable knowledge as your own while reaping the rewards time and time again. Head to www.sidehustlelaura.com/DWA or click the link in the show notes to step into the world of digital entrepreneurship today. Remember, your journey to success begins now. Keep believing and keep breaking free. Man, that's depressing.
It's not meant to be depressing or disheartening. That's historically what it's been. That doesn't mean it's what it has to be.
Right.
What I'm here to say is, if you wait until it's time to retire to try to do this, trying to steer that big heavy ship and make a big move the last minute is very difficult. But starting at the beginning and making incremental adjustments to your strategy is painless. It doesn't come with a huge investment of time or money, because you're making a little adjustments or adaptations at a time versus trying to do it all at one time.
Yeah.
And doing it while you're still small, right? It's easier to do things when you're small than when you've got tons and tons of employees.
So what can people do? What can they start? And I know you've talked a little bit about having a framework, whether it's
Yes,
for an individual or for a business, but
absolutely.
what can people do?
The very first thing a person, now again, the best time to start planning your exit is when you start. The next best time is now.
Yeah.
So, what do they say? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that is that some of you on this call already have your business. So I don't mean this to slam you and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that and now you're stuck. That's not the case. You're going to be able to take what I'm talking about now and apply it in your life. But the perfect world is, if a person is thinking, I want to jump ship, I want to be an escape artist, I want to escape the corporate lifestyle and do something for myself, the first thing I'm going to say is be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes what people are wanting to escape is what I mentioned earlier, that they're trading their priorities, their wants, dreams, and desires for $20 an hour or $50 an hour or $100 an hour. It doesn't matter if it's $1,000 an hour. If you're trading your desires and your priorities, it's too little.
Yeah.
You're trading your dreams for someone for some financial security. So a lot of people, when they make that decision and they say, I'm done, and they're being reactive, they're making what can be an impulsive decision.
Mhm.
And in that impulsive decision, it's anything's better than what I have. And what I would say in most cases, if you don't take this step I'm going to talk about now first, you're likely jumping from the frying pan into a fire. You see, what you have right now is a job. You've got an arrangement you made as a consenting adult to accept a certain amount of money and benefits and time off to provide a certain function for someone else. Now, if you're wanting to leave, if you don't like your job, then wouldn't it make sense to figure out what you don't like about your job so you don't move that into a business?
Mm.
So one of the first things that you want to think about before you make the move, and I would say, if you're at all able to, without, if you're not having dramatic impacts on your mental health staying where that you're at, or your physical health, I can understand those things and you have to make decisions based on those. But if it's a matter of, I just don't want to be doing this anymore, I'd like to go do something different, you know what? Keep doing your job. If you're not in danger of getting fired, you've got a paycheck while you're figuring this out.
Totally.
And you're not wasting it because you're actually investing your time in creating a solution for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that the solution isn't a $97 course, right? There's nothing to say that these courses can't be helpful. But until you do this first thing, which is figuring out what is the right fit for you, taking any further steps is only putting you further and further away from the outcome that you want.
Right.
Right? It's going to be a bigger shift you have to make once you figure it out. So this framework is 6 things, and they all start with P, right? So make it real easy. The first P is purpose and passion. You use either one of those. So what you want to do is you want to sit down and remember the example I gave about myself, at 29 years old, saying, okay, I want a really different life than I had. How do I do that? Well, I've got to change the inputs, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing things I didn't want to do. We're never going to fulfill me. We're never going to give me the life that I wanted. So the first thing I had to look at was and this has evolved a bit. It's a little more detailed now. If you could invest your time, treasure, and talents any way that you wanted right now, what would that be?
And I think so many
Clearly,
people haven't considered that question.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you had them already in your job, you wouldn't be dissatisfied. There's some aspect of those things I just mentioned that are not being fulfilled for you. It's spiritually, emotionally, or financially. Something is not being fulfilled for you in that role. So really take some time to have a careful inventory of how would I be investing my time, treasure, and talents right now if I could have a clean slate? Because you do. The moment you decide you want to go into business for yourself, you've given yourself the most incredible gift ever.
Yeah.
The problem is that most people, that gift only lasts for 5 minutes because the first thing they've done, okay, I've decided I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to go find a business.
Yeah.
And they've not considered these other things first. And what they wind up doing without evaluating, is this aligned with my purpose, with my values, with who I want to serve? Am I clear on all of those things? They wind up picking something that's not in alignment with those things. And they wind up just in another job, only with a much worse boss
Yes.
themselves. Because when you're your own boss, you can ignore overtime rules.
Mhm.
There's no such thing as harassment, right? You can talk really, no matter how mean your boss is, we talk much worse to ourselves.
Yeah.
So being
You leave
very
working 40 hours a week to work 100 plus hours per week. And I
exact,
love that you mentioned, the vision, the mission, the values that people have. Because I talk about this all the time. And I will probably talk about it until I'm blue in the face because so many people ignore the fact that that's so important, not only for yourself, but from a business perspective. And as somebody who has done branding and marketing for businesses, there are so many businesses out there that ignore that same thing of like, well, we don't necessarily have values. Like, the standard list of values, like all of those apply to us. Well, you still have to have an idea of what is prioritized in your business so that the right people can align their values with yours. And if they can't, they should not be there.
absolutely. So, there are a number of things I could really dive in really deep here, but I want to be mindful of our time. One of the things I'll tell you is one of the most expensive things that can happen in your business to your costs is employee turnover.
Mm,
Now, you could make the best investment in a new hire that comes highly recommended, and they can be incredible at what they do.
yeah.
If you've got a mission and vision that aren't well clarified, you're not able to separate folks that align with you and folks that don't before they come in the front door. So you wind up hiring someone who's a great hire, only for them to find out when they get there, this isn't what I thought it was. They're not about what I assumed they were about. They're not engaged, therefore they're not as productive. And you're thinking, wow, they came so highly recommended. Well, yeah, they probably were aligned with that previous company. And
Yeah.
when you're engaged, it's a proven fact that when people are engaged, they're 29% more productive.
Hmm.
So making sure that you're attracting, if a lot of people are afraid, well, people don't want to be rejected. So one of the reasons that folks don't put out that, public mission and vision is they think everybody's their customer. Everybody's not your customer.
Yeah.
That the more vague your customer is, the less satisfied they all are. When you're really crystal clear on who you serve, then the solutions that you're developing are perfect for them, and you're going to have 5 stars versus have a lot of people that are kind of half satisfied. The other thing is when you're hiring people who aren't interested in what you're about, aren't going to waste your time with an application. You're not going to
Yeah.
waste your time in payroll hiring them.
Yeah.
But
And
people
let's
who
remind listeners that can be a really good thing. Like,
absolutely, those
yeah.
could be both you and that potential employee could be dodging a bullet,
Yep.
right? I mean, I'm sorry, with recent circumstances, that maybe wasn't the best analogy, but you could be dodging a hire that wasn't beneficial, right?
Totally.
Versus if you've got something that's really clear, then people who do resonate with what you're about will beat a path to your door.
Yep.
They will be on the same page. They won't constantly saying, why do they have me doing this? They are going to have an ownership mentality around your mission. And consequently, they're going to be more productive, and therefore you're going to be more profitable.
Yep. Yeah, and on the opposite end of that, like we discussed, if there's no alignment and you don't understand, um, your own values or the business or brand's values, and you're not aligned, that's detrimental to both of you as the employee who is not seeking or not finding satisfaction in your work and not being engaged and not being productive. And it also is going to reflect poorly on the business who is now getting negative reviews and is now, not maintaining a positive reputation online.
Absolutely. So there are 4 types of capital that drive the great majority of the value in a business, right? There's strategic, customer, human, and social capital. So social is culture and customer is self-explanatory. So think about it this way. If you've got a toxic culture inside your business, then that is going to spill over into how your employees engage with your customers.
Mm.
What's your customer's experience going to be? Picture that you've gone into a restaurant with someone who's got all the swag all over their name tags, and they're friendly and engaging and making recommendations what you should buy, versus that one waitress we've all seen in a movie that walks up to the table with a coffee pot. You want any coffee?
Yep.
You want to order something? Which one is likely to get a repeat customer? So all of that culture piece is so very important. And that all comes down to, none of that happens on accident.
Mm-hmm.
Without clarity of mission and vision, none of the other things can happen, because you're the leader. If you don't have vision, you can't chart a course. If you don't chart a course, there's nothing that your customers or your employees can follow. So investing that time in the beginning and being really clear on that stuff is going to pay dividends when you grow your business. But there's another place very personally for you that's going to pay dividends. We all know about the institution of marriage, and we know that we hear that there's a high failure rate in marriage. And let's face it, there's a high failure rate in most relationships. And oftentimes, there's either a lack of compatibility in the beginning or a lack of capability in the long term because people have changed. Well, it's not a secret, or it shouldn't be if you're in a relationship with someone. What has fallen apart? Communication. See, if we're able to communicate with one another over time, then it's not a surprise. There are things maybe we work on in our relationship. I say this as somebody who had a 23-year marriage and has gone through a divorce. I am not being self-righteous in any way. All of this has come from mistakes I've made myself and learned from. So when we look at a business and we go in without having really clarified this and the other 5 things I'm going to talk about, you've got the honeymoon phase where you're excited that you escaped the corporate grind and you're in this new thing. But like most relationships, the honeymoon phase wears off.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you going to find when it wears off? Are you going to find a role that you're not fulfilled in? Are you going to find yourself burned out? Because I'll tell you, most clients that are brought to me, they're not brought to plan. People avoid planning. They're brought to me because they want out or they have to get out, like the one I just mentioned a few minutes ago. But the ones that want to get out, typically they're burned out. Why are they burned out? Because they're doing something they don't want to do. They're burned out like you are in your job right now that you want out of.
Yeah.
So being clear in the beginning helps you to avoid that. When I was in retail, I've got a good work ethic, but I was ready to leave an hour after I got there every day. I didn't want to be there. I don't work now. Now, I'm engaged in what I do well over 10 hours most days in one way or another. As I'm building my business, as I'm working with nonprofit organizations all over the country, helping them reach, underserved communities on this topic. It's not work to me. It's my purpose. It's my mission. If it was anything else, I wouldn't have the energy and drive to do it.
For sure.
So the biggest gift that you can give yourself is in clarifying your mission, vision, purpose, your values. Then you get to continue to give yourself the gift, which is a vehicle that's purpose-built to drive only one path in this entire world. And that one path is towards the future and the success as you define it, not as somebody else defines it.
I love that so much.
So now the next P is powers. Now, as I mentioned, in me, it was, I'm good at numbers. I'm good at communicating. As you've all probably noticed, I talk a lot. And that's just, I've tried to change that before, but I'm like, you know what, that's just a part of me. I just harness it. People will take what they want from it. I'm not going to censor myself. I used to censor myself. The energy and creativity that comes from ADHD, all of those things are powers. The things that it's like, I'm not going to be the taskmaster, right? I'm not going to be the project manager, so to speak, that's got their hand in that day to day, because I don't want my clients to fail.
Right.
So I look at those things. And also, many of you may be parents, right? So you might be able to relate to this. Maybe you're good at managing your kids. It doesn't mean that you want to follow them around all day to see if they cleaned up their room or if they wash the dishes, right? Likewise, you may be good at that skill because you're a parent, but do you want to do that in the workplace?
Yeah.
So
there's two people in this world that I will do that for, and it's only my children.
Exactly. So in your own mix of knowledge, skills, and experience, you're going to look at what knowledge, skills, and experience do I currently have? What talents do I currently have? Which knowledge, skills, and experience could I reasonably get within the period of time that I would need them for this venture I'm considering? And what things am I good at, but I want nothing to do with? That's equally important, because since you're starting with a clean slate anyway, your next step then is preferences, right? So you've taken an inventory of what your purpose is, what your mission is, and I mean personally, right? If you're a person of faith, and I don't use that to proselytize anyone. I speak a lot from my own experience. It's what is important and what things are important that I include in my business or in my daily activities. Because if my faith is important to me and I'm not considering that in how I run my business, now I'm being two people, right? And one of them is not authentic. And so you can only do that for so long before you're going to be burned out, frustrated, angry with yourself, just whatever the outcome is. So being clear on that, having an inventory of what you bring to the table personally, and what things that you bring to the table that you don't want people to know about. I mean, how many of you have a job where people tell you that you're really good at something and you do it, but you really don't want to be doing it? Well, now you've actually, the minute that you leave that job, you don't have to tell anybody about that other skill, right? You're getting the chance to write your own script. So the next thing that you want to do in preferences is you're going to write your perfect job description. I don't care if your job description is, I just want to answer the phone all day, right? If that's all you want to do, that's all you want to do. And you might say, well, Mike, there's no business that's all that you can do. I'm not saying that it is. But that little piece of information is going to be very helpful when you go to look at businesses. Because if you say, I'm good at all these things, but the only thing that I want to do is answer the phone, well, then it's like, well, what other knowledge, skills, and experience are going to be necessary to operate this business I'm considering buying? Well, if there's a lot of them, then it's like, well, can the business afford to hire those individuals and still pay me? See, what we've just done, if you're on a dating app, what we've just done is we found your first swipe left.
Right.
We have the first disqualifier on a business you might look at, because otherwise any business could look good, right? Because it's a way for you to get out of the relationship you currently have with a job. You found one that seems exciting at the moment, but is it really Mr. or Mrs. Right, or is it just Mr. right now?
Right. Which again, I think goes back to the whole importance of being honest with that, because I imagine, and I have certainly done this before too, where when you write out that perfect job description, it's probably easy to not be completely truthful because you're constantly doubting whether or not what your perfect job description is valuable enough to others.
And I think that is an incredibly important point, because one of the other things that you'll want to do while you're doing this entire exercise, these first three that I'm mentioning, is you want to seek the feedback of people close to you who care about and love you.
Yeah.
People that will tell you the truth, even if they know you're not going to like it. Because there can be things that we undervalue about ourselves, but there may be some unreasonable things about ourselves that we think that people see us a certain way, and we really aren't seen that way, right? So we have to, we really need to be able to lean and not make these these observations in a vacuum so that we all have blind spots.
Yeah.
And so, that is, going back to my inventory. My job in that retail was management, right?
Mhm.
Now, it was around merchandising and sales, but it was management nonetheless. That wasn't the best place for me to be.
Right.
Obviously looking at, when I see my weaknesses, right? So it wasn't the best choice. Now, at the time, it was what I could qualify for and what I could get, what I thought I could get. But that you're making the very good point around that. Yes, you're going to have blind spots. You're going to undervalue or overvalue things. Get feedback from those around you. If you're married or have a life partner or someone that significantly depends on the outcomes of your decisions, include them in this conversation. Because whether it's in that first 90% of businesses that fail, or the 80% of mature businesses that fail when they're trying to sell, virtually all of the causes of failure can boil down to one thing, and that's it's a lack of communication with one or more parties. So that open communication from the beginning is important, because we also are going to look at principle, and principle goes into what you have as resources that you bring to the table.
Okay.
Like capital investment, right? That's what principle do you have in the deal? And that's why I use that as a P. You can equally use assets, but it doesn't fit the P framework. So, but the other things are, what knowledge capital can you bring from other people? So as you're having conversations with people around you that know, love, and trust you, you may find that some of them not only might have good input for you around a particular thing, but because now they know that you're considering this and think you'd be really good at it, maybe that they've got a skill that they could bring to the table.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. My better half, Sherry. I met her later in life. This was a gift, right? If I'd met her any sooner than I did, it wouldn't have worked. So she's the most incredible, organized, OCD, hyper-focused balance to me that I could ask for, and that she would be the absolute best hire I could make to oversee everything that's a weakness for me. That's why, my objective is to eventually replace how I'm having that done currently by retiring her from her career when she's ready to.
Nice.
So you'll find, as you're having these honest, vulnerable, authentic conversations, that opportunities and insights are going to come to you that are going to help you shape your decision making and what you're thinking about. They're going to help you think about things. Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, maybe that is a limitation, or maybe that should be a priority as well. Or, wow, you'd be interested in helping me with that? Or you never know what's going to come out of those conversations, right? And so those conversations then will have helped you come up with knowing what values you have that you want to make sure that you have an enterprise that aligns with, that makes sure that you're passionate, focused, and fueled to get through the beginning time, that likely you will be working many more hours than you did at your job. That's a reality of entrepreneurship, particularly in the beginning. Now, long-term, it doesn't have to be. Unfortunately, for most people, they don't do what's necessary to make the business not dependent on them. So unfortunately, long-term, it doesn't have to be. This is something that is part of the whole continuum that I help coach people on, is making sure that you don't wind up in that boat, right?
Yeah.
But ideally, these first four are going to help make sure that you are choosing a path that aligns with your purpose, mission, vision, passion, values, all of that, so that it is the perfect vehicle to carry you to those outcomes that you want.
Excellent.
That you've identified what roles, what components of that engine you can be the best part of, and what other components you need to acquire, right? What other talent you need to bring in from elsewhere, so that you're mindful of that. What are your gaps? What are your blind spots, right? And then preferences, looking at, okay, I can build all these parts. I'm all these parts, but this is the only one I really want to be for this
Yeah,
engine.
you get to choose.
You get to choose, right? So not only are you getting to pursue your passion, but you're pursuing your passion doing only the one part that you want to do. How easy does that make your life?
Yeah.
You might say, well, that sounds too good to be true. It's not. It's too good to be true if you don't take the steps necessary to make that happen, but you just have to be very intentional and you have to be disciplined, which can be difficult in the beginning. And when I say disciplined, that means that you only want to do the one thing, then stick to that. If you find a business that, oh, I like this business, well, I'd have to do that one more thing, but that's okay. No, you got to have your non-negotiables, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then we've looked at principle. What are you going to bring to the table? What do you have in money? Do you have credit? Does that need to be worked on? What steps need to be taken there? Does your resume align with what would be necessary to run that business? If you're going to have to get a loan, one of the things for being ready to get a loan is that the bank is going to see, is that business, if you're buying a business, is that business bankable, right? Is it worth buying? And then who are you to run that business? So can you write a resume that makes you the perfect candidate for that business and for your role in that business, right? So you're going to be clear on all of that. And then next is predilections. Now, predilections is a fancy word for preferences. And honestly, I just really couldn't think of another P word that wasn't preferences that really addressed preferences as it relates to lifestyle. Right?
Okay.
So preferences here are very distinct from the preferences you have about what you want to do in your work day. The preferences about what you do in your work day are what are going to help you be effective in your business so that the outcome of that business provides you with the predilections of how you would want to live your life.
Totally.
This is everything from how far do you want your commute to be? If you say, you know what? I love working at home since the pandemic. I found out I can do that. Well, I will tell you that 4 years ago, if you would have told me that I would have an office looking out over a tree line where the other room, when I walk out of my office in the morning, I sit and watch the sunrise out one window, having my coffee, and I look out the other window and have my glass of wine in the evening. I knew that's what I wanted. I assumed that would have to be on a mountaintop, and I thought it would have to be the day that I retire.
Yeah.
I'm living it today. My office is upstairs in my home, and it's not that it's any palatial mansion or anything like that. But when you're very intentional about what you want, your mind starts making subconscious decisions and adjustments to help you guide yourself there, to help you guide your decision making toward that. And so I'm sitting here today living that life, living in Music City where, I always wanted to live, never thought that was going to happen either, right?
And it's also because you've been honest with yourself and you set your non-negotiables.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was I always honest with myself? No. No, but it's hard fought tuition, hard fought lessons that I'm glad to share at another time that, some things that I went through that really became expensive tuition for me, that really of what made me even more passionate about this process. Okay. So the other thing about predilections is, so you've got, what do you want your commute to be, right? What do you want your flexibility to be? If you say, I want flexibility in my time, I want to be able to go to my kids' field trips, right? If you own a restaurant, you're going to be there at lunch.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. So unless it's absentee owner, you are going to be there at lunch. That does not align with that priority for you. So again, you've got to be honest with yourself about how important that is to you. If you would, in the beginning, say, it's important for me to have that time with my kids investing in their growing up, and you see this business, it's a restaurant, and you say, well, I just got to be at lunch. That's okay. You have to be honest with yourself. Okay, is it more important to find a business fast that seems exciting because it's a restaurant than what you originally said was your priority, which was to pour into your children's life in that way?
Which one are you not willing to compromise?
Exactly. There's no way for you to do that in the moment. It's why it's so important to invest the time in the beginning to really lay these out in writing, not in your head, in writing. It has to be in writing. Okay, so the other thing is, how much money do I need from the business now? Now, it may be that your significant other has a career opportunity in a rural area. And maybe there's a lower cost of living and you don't necessarily need income, but you need something to do. And you're moving to this area and you need something to do. It's like, well, I want a business, right? So you have a business and you're like, it's more of a project. I don't need it for income. I want something to do that fulfills these interests for me. Well, that's one thing. Or, hey, you know what? Risk comes with reward. And if I need consistent income, my growth rate probably isn't, a mature business isn't going to grow as fast as a younger startup or a turnaround business that you're fixing, right? Your return on investment is going to be higher, but your risk is higher. So you got to be really honest with yourself about what you need from the business right now. So if you were to say, I need income from my business presently, and my budget, what I need to live on a year is $50,000 a year is what I need to replace my, maybe I made 80 at my job, but I could live with 50 from my business. Well, then you need to be able to find a business that can net you $50,000, but not just net $50,000. Now we got to go back up and look at, can you take $50,000 out of that business as it currently sits? Or are you going to have to hire those individuals to fill those roles that you don't want to do? If you say, yeah, well, I've got to hire a general manager because I only want to answer phones. Okay, well, then you don't just need 50,000. You probably need 100,000 to pay for that manager and their benefits, and then 50 for you. So now you need to find a business that's going to generate $150,000 in current income right now. And you'd say, okay, well, the average small business goes for 2.5 to 3.5 times earnings. So, okay, well, if I'm going 3 times as an average, okay, 150, maybe I'm looking for a $450,000 business that's going to generate enough income. That's just rule of thumb, right? So see, by identifying these things, you're able then to quantify what it is that you're looking for. Now you know the kind of business and what industry is a fit for you. You know what your job description is, so you know that what talent has to be hired. You know, in order to do that, what kind of profitability has to be generated from that business to afford it. You'll also know that if you have to get a loan, how much debt service has to be there in the business to pay for that while still paying you, right? So having gone through those 5 steps so far, now you've got an idea of what industry, how far from home, what flexibility, and how much money you're going to need to get to buy that business. That sounds great, right? Sounds like at present, you could have a really rewarding business. But here's what typically happens. Let's assume a person gets the business that they love. What typically happens in my experience, because you'll notice my company's name is BizLeavable. The reason it's a really unique opportunity for me to talk with folks that are early in their businesses is because of my experience and what happens at the end of the career. The people that I'm working with typically have not planned. I am blessed, and they are blessed if I'm able to get with them 5 years before they want to be out, right? Because we can make some adjustments that aren't going to be, unattainable. 5 years gives us a good amount of time, but they're saying, I want to sell my business now. It's like, okay, well, let's put lipstick on the pig and figure it out.
Right. Yeah.
So what typically happens is the person gets a business. The business becomes dependent on them. Therefore, there's no transferable value. Most business owners that I take on as new clients, they went out of their business because they feel overwhelmed. They're intimidated because they don't know how to go about getting their business. They think they have a binary choice. They can either sell their business or they can keep doing the thing that they feel is driving them crazy or killing them slowly.
Yeah.
They feel like they've only got 2 choices. And so the first question that I asked, not the very first question, but as we go through what's making them unhappy in the business, I asked them a very difficult question. Knowing everything that you know about your business right now, if you saw your business on the market right now, would you buy it?
Mm.
Obviously, the answer is no. The follow-up question is if you wouldn't want to buy it, why would anybody else?
Right.
So if it's a thing that you're not interested in the field, but it's still a profitable business, that's one thing. But people don't have such a strong reaction and want out because it's like, I've just got a different interest right now. The ones that are just like, I want out, it's because they're burned out. The relationship, the marriage between them and their business has done this. And they've reached a point of irreconcilable differences, or that's what they think they've reached. This is the point where myself as an advisor, if I'm talking to someone that just they want out, they think they don't want to fix it, it's like marriage counseling.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, if they're willing to invest the time, we're able to get them back to a point that they don't want a divorce from their business because they want what they get from the business. They want the income, right?
Right.
They want those things. What they don't want is the fact that it's 24/7 drain on their life. And the fact of the matter is, if they were to extricate themselves from that business right now, they'd have a business-shaped hole in their life.
Mhm.
So even though they got the thing out that's it's not that the business fits into their life, which is how it should be. It's that they're having to conform their life to supporting that business like an adult child that doesn't want to get a job.
Right.
So that business has become a job that you no longer want. No one else is going to want to buy it. So what we look at is what are the causes? Usually it's that the owner has not been willing to delegate. They haven't identified the things that they shouldn't be touching, right? Owners typically will keep a tight rein of control and typically that's out of this insecurity. Because again, we go into business often financially illiterate, going into something where we have no background at all, and we're just kind of making it happen.
Yeah.
We hopefully wind up past that 15-year point and we've figured out where all the pitfalls are, and now we're kind of on autopilot. And so we've learned to fly the plane. The problem is no one taught you how to land it. So people find themselves at the point that they want to get out and they don't know where to begin. In fact, 52% of surveyed owners indicated that they've done no planning for their eventual exit. 2/3 of those indicated that was because they didn't know where to begin.
Wow.
On a separate survey, 54% of owners are over the age of 50. Half of those surveyed, half of all business owners surveyed indicated they want to be out within the next 5 years. There are 33 million small business, which means we've got over 17 million owned by people over 50. 9 million of those want to sell within the next 5 years. Most of them aren't ready to sell. Most of those businesses aren't sellable. And historically, 4 and 5 of those will close down in the process. So the things we have to do first, my first objective with a new client, again, find out where them, as a business owner, has had their business 30 years. If you can invest your time, treasure, and talents wherever you wanted, it's no different than I'd ask you as a brand new entrepreneur, where would you be investing them? And if you're not now, why not? Let's see if we can fix that. My next objective is to get them 20 hours a week of their own time back. Because believe me, you're going into this entrepreneurial journey. That is, no matter how much money you make, it will never be more valuable than the amount of money or the amount of time that you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And so it's important that you invest that time wisely.
Mm-hmm.
So we identify those things that are being undertaken by the entrepreneur that have no business being done by them. Now, the reason, again, they don't delegate is this insecurity. They don't know what they don't know. So they're afraid to let go of things. It's like, I don't know how to coach them to do it. I just know that it's going well, and I'm afraid to let go of the steering wheel.
Yeah.
So if we begin to tell them, look, you're the face of the business, you're the brand, you're the vision, you're the relationship, you're who people have built trust with. That's your highest and best value. Anything that's not driving $1,000 an hour to this business is supposed to be done by you. You shouldn't be doing $20 an hour work. That $20 an hour work is critical, but you won't be able to pay for that $20 an hour work, a number of people to do it, if you're not doing the $1,000 an hour work, right?
Totally.
So it's really making sure the human capital part, the right people in the right seats.
Yeah.
Making sure that we're delegating that.
Huge. Yeah.
And so then we look at where we said, now you're at the point that you want to exit. you want to retire and you haven't figured it out. Well, that's posterity. That's the P. I'll give you an example. So several years ago, about 5 years ago now, started working with a company in a rural area. It was a 75-year-old company. They had, at the time, 58 employees. They were doing, they had about 30% of their market share. They were one of the largest employers in their community, right? And there were 2 generations of some families working at this business, not owners, employees, where they're working there and now their kids are working, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a sense of community. The 3rd generation of that family, unfortunately weren't able to take over the business, right? So this other individual, took over the company. 10 years in, I met him. And he was in his 40s at that time. I said, I got to ask you, he was at a conference. He was sitting next to me at a conference. I said, I got to ask, look around this room. Most of the people here are 10, 15 years older than you. What has you thinking about this? Most people your age don't think about it. He goes, well, I got the company because the 2nd generation folks that had it, they were wanting to retire, and 3rd generation wasn't able to take it over, and they didn't have a plan B.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to Forrest Gump, I'm paraphrasing, him getting into the business and making sure that it didn't fail. He goes, I don't want to be in their shoes, and I want to make sure things are good for my employees.
Yeah.
The other things that were important to him is community. Didn't want his employees to ever have to worry about their jobs, wanted to make sure that when I was being in the community. Well, looking at, for that individual, what is the right kind of exit? You're going to see people online all the time talking about flipping businesses, going into acquisitions, getting businesses with no money down. You'll see brokers and M&A advisors talking about selling. These are all important functions. Some of the things, I'll just leave it at, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But what I would say is those 2 things are solutions looking for a problem, right?
Mm.
They're a tool.
Yeah.
They don't represent, selling a business isn't for everybody. Buying a business isn't for everybody, for a third party. So in an exit, priorities are important. For this individual, a third party sale would have been 100% the wrong thing to do, because post-sale, you have no control over what happens to the business. So therefore, the only thing that did the things that he wanted to do, and on top of that, rewarded the employees for helping put that company in a position for him to be able to retire comfortably with his family and achieve the legacy that he wanted to, and the causes that he gave to, was employee ownership. This company is now 100% employee owned.
I love that.
That means that over the years, all of those employees are going to personally benefit from the value that they create in the business by their efforts. That is an exit designed with purpose for an outcome. Wente Wines, if you've ever heard of Wente Wines, is a 4th generation vineyard family. So they've purposely they've got staff development and activities that take, family members from a very young age and really get them in the culture of the business.
Yeah.
Other things that are done are like, well, you also have to go get a job somewhere else with someone that's not your mom and doesn't care that you had a hard time last night if you're not coming to work, getting that experience, that responsibility of working for someone else where you can actually get fired, right? So there's different priorities you have for a family transition, right? So in all of these discussions, looking at the posterity piece is looking at, what do you want your life? It's my new podcast that'll be coming out called Life After the Grind. What do you want that life after business to look like? I'll tell you that the importance of this, 4 in 5 owners list their businesses for sale, go out of business in the process, means only 1 in 5, 20% successfully do so.
Wow.
Of those, half of them have to make concessions or reductions in their price or terms to get it sold. And of all of those that successfully do so, 3 in 4 indicate that they profoundly regretted it within 12 months. Wasn't because of
Wow.
the money. It was because they no longer had purpose.
Yeah.
Business was their identity. It was 60, 80 hours a week. And suddenly now, who am I? And so really investing the time to figure out, first and foremost, how does the business become a vehicle to get me where I want? If the kind of life you want is a racetrack, a pickup truck is not going to be the vehicle to build to get you there. Conversely, if the life you want is being a farmer, a Ferrari is going to have absolutely no value to you, even though it's a great vehicle for racing, right? So making sure that the business that you're building is purpose built to the life you want now, and from the posterity standpoint, investing the time in figuring out what your next act looks like is very important, because you have the unique opportunity not only to create the life that you want now, but you also get the chance to write your last act.
Yeah.
If you don't write your last act, you're trusting the writing team of fate and circumstances, neither of which are known for their happy endings.
Yeah. That's so eye-opening and so important. I can imagine that so many people who have been, I mean, even listeners that are currently in a job or have been thinking about business or are already working for themselves, it is so eye-opening to remember that it's not just about now, because so many entrepreneurs now are like, I'm ready to work for myself. I'm ready to build a legacy. I'm ready to do this. But they don't think about the longevity, like what's to come after this. What does it mean for future generations? What does it mean for your family? What does it mean for your children and your children's children? You're making decisions that can affect so many other people.
Absolutely. They're a great way to get to those root things. A goal is not to work for yourself. A goal is not to make a lot of money. A goal is, what will that do for you?
Yeah.
So it's like, I want to work for myself. Okay, well, what will that do for you? Well, I won't have to work for this boss. I won't have to do what? Well, what won't you have to do? What tasks is it that you're not wanting to do, right? So you really have to dig in. You can't leave it at, I want to make $1 million a year, and the only way I can do that is not having to trade time for dollars. Well, yeah, but there's a lot of ways that you can make $1 million, right? Is it if it's not in alignment with your values and with your passions, you're likely not to make $1 million at that either,
Yeah.
right? So, and you got to figure out, why is $1 million important? I've run into people who they'll list their business for sale, and I want $1 million for my business. Why do you want $1 million for your business? It's just the number they have. They have no idea if their business is worth that amount. They have no idea what their business is worth.
Yeah.
It's just they think it's $1 million. Well, is that even enough? Is that even enough to achieve what you want? So it's an uninformed goal. So
Yeah.
likewise, when you're going into the business, I mean, let's face it, the possibilities are endless. The impacts that you can have on the world are only limited by your imagination and your courage to have that imagination. Your imagination, if you're able to use it in your job, only benefits the bottom line of your employer. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as that's a trade you're willing to make.
Yeah.
But if you want to do that for yourself, at least say, well, how big can I make that? And what am I willing to give up for it?
Yeah.
And knowing that in advance is critical to have a fulfilling entrepreneurial experience.
Love that. Amazing. And thank you for sharing that framework. I think that's going to be very helpful for a lot of people, Mike. Can you share a little bit of information about, you mentioned to me earlier, your business avatar. Can you let us know a little bit more about that?
So everything that we just discussed with these 6 Ps boils down to a tool that I created. It's called Your Business Avatar. I've seen time and again, as I've worked with a number of these organizations, that there's a huge focus on starting businesses and accessing capital. And nothing really around, okay, well, you're getting a business. If you start a business from scratch, why do you do that? Well, it makes sense 100% of the time if it's a technology or a service that never existed before. Sometimes it makes sense if it's a product or service that exists and is demand in your area, but there isn't a provider for that already. Okay, so in most circumstances, a startup makes sense. But in most circumstances, if you're tired of working in a machine shop and you want to open your own fabrication business, well, instead of going out and borrowing a bunch of money, and starting from scratch and hoping you don't run out of working capital before you get enough customers, why not buy a proven existing business that has cash flow, that has good practices in place? You're stepping into profitability day one.
Yeah.
Have employees day one. There's no reinventing the wheel, right? So that's one aspect I talk to people about, is how entrepreneurship is the lower risk path. Buying a business is lower risk path to entrepreneurship. And then beyond that even is buying a franchise. So your business avatar explores a number of things. It explores the aspects we discussed with the 6 Ps, but it also will, and including things like personality, things that are really going to identify what kind of an entrepreneur would you be? What would be a fulfilling day? What would be how you want to spend your time? All the things that we discussed here. And then it's going to challenge you, much like, if any of you are old like me, you'll remember ad libs from when you were a kid, and there would be a little thing and you write in there. Yeah. Yep. So it's kind of like that, where you're writing in answers as they relate to you. That's going to help you identify what would be the perfect business and day-to-day experience for you to have in that business, so that before you ever go look at a bizbuysell.com or any other place that has a business listings for sale, think of those sites just like, eHarmony or any of the other dating sites. You want to be swiping left way more than you're swiping right. And you want to preserve those swiping right for things that truly are right for you, so that by the time you get into one of those or an investing time, then we can be looking for the red flags, because that's really the next step. But really, this part here is just to identify the right kinds of business. So it's called Your Business Avatar. And we are actually going to have, for viewers here, it's bizleavable.com/escape artist.
Awesome.
And this will be, and it's just a downloadable tool that it'll be in PDF form. We will be, creating something, in my customer center for that with my courses. But at this point in time, I've been using it in workshops I've been doing for organizations. So it's all been just a fillable PDF.
Great. Love that.
And then,
thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing the education, the framework, giving us resources to use. I can't express enough how much this has opened my eyes. So I know for a fact it's opening many other people's eyes into so many things that force us to be more brutally honest with ourselves and really think about what our values are, what our personal missions are, and making sure that, if we are going into business or we are going to be a part of someone else's business, the importance of true alignment so that both parties can be happy, productive, and successful.
Absolutely. It's, the money, like I said, the money is really one of the last thing I discuss with clients, whether they're acquiring or selling, because, the money is typically, in the grand scheme of things, when they look at it, winds up being the least important thing.
Yeah.
My own personal experience, I had a personal experience several years ago. So I went from being in my private practice to then taking a role with the second largest pension organization in the country, doing their strategic planning and performance management. So that's a fancy way of saying helping to set the strategic direction for the company and helping to identify how we measure success and course correction along the way, right? So I was at the top of my career. I had a health issue result from not being in alignment. I loved some of the tasks. The environment in which I was performing it exacerbated a health issue I had at the time. And that cost me some years.
Yeah.
I had to rebuild. It was a huge learning thing for me from, as much as I talk about purpose and everything, that was one of those things where I feel like God gave me some personal experience to be able to speak from. That was a gift. It was expensive tuition, but that not being aligned, particularly if you're in a high activity, high performance thing, if you're doing something that's not in alignment with how you're built, you're exponentially increasing the possibility of failure. And so it's really important to, demonstrably, other than money, to make sure that you're doing something that's in alignment if you want true long-term success as you personally define it. And I don't know if
Amen.
it'd be of interest to you. If you think there's some of your listeners that already are in business, I have a resource too to help them find out where their gaps are in their
Sure.
existing business. If you would, let's do that as we'll do that as Escape Artist 2.
Awesome.
And basically what you'll be able to do, that one is online. That is one I already use with my exit plan clients. And what you're able to do is go in there, give your feelings about your business and where you're at, and it will identify where anything that may be standing in the way of your eventual sale, and it will prioritize them in the order that you probably should be looking at addressing them.
Oh,
And it's a
great.
great
Okay.
place to start.
Okay. All right. We'll include that in the description as well so that people can go ahead and check those out. Thank you again. And then aside from those resources, which you've so generously given us, where else can people go to learn more about you and your business online?
Wonderful. So you can look me up on, I have a YouTube channel under Mike Balstad. You can look up under BizLeavable, it'll show up under BizLeavable as well. You can find, I've got my professional, my LinkedIn page. You can look me up there as Mike Balstad. On Facebook, you can look me up under Mike Balstad, SEPA, or BizLeavable. So I have my Certified Exit Planning Advisor. So I have both of my professional pages there. Feel free to look me up there, connect, info@BizLeavable if you need to reach me by email.
Great. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here. You've been so educational and so helpful with the information that you've shared. And I'm sure a lot of listeners weren't expecting to have an episode like this that touches on, the financial aspect of thinking with the end in mind. And I certainly have not spent enough time thinking about that myself. So I appreciate, you bringing your experience, some of your personal experience, the professional experience that you have to share with the audience today. It's been really special to hear all of these things. And I'm certainly taking a lot of this to heart, and it's going to help me kind of mold the trajectory in the future that I want to see with my own business, as I'm sure it will for so many others. So thank you so much again for sharing that. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to being of any help that I can, and looking forward to your continued success.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. We'll chat soon.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Bye.